going to tell you something I've never told anyone. 30 years ago, my friends and I spent the night at a cabin. We found the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, the Book of the Dead. Certain passages were recited. It awoke something in the woods. Something evil. I was the only one to escape. But now, the evil has found me.
Hello and welcome to the Ash vs. Evil Dead podcast. This is a podcast in which we break down the Ash vs. Evil Dead TV series, which airs on Starz and of course is based off of the Evil Dead franchise. Joining me tonight, as always, is your friend and mine, Mr. Kyle Thomas. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, JP?
I am doing great.
That is good to hear. I am pretty stoked that we're on episode 2 now. Finally, I know that this series itself is kind of ahead of us. Probably not when this is going to be released. Well, actually, it'll probably be super ahead of us when this is released. But I'm just glad that we're on the second episode here. We're kind of skimming through these episodes. They're not very long, so pretty excited about this new endeavor we got going on. So
absolutely, I'm having fun watching it. And for those of you just joining us, we will be spoiling these episodes as we go through them. They're super short, and it's pretty much impossible to talk about them at length and not spoil them, especially when you go episode to episode in each podcast. So there will be spoilers, so keep that in mind. And with that said, I guess we can hop into episode number 2, which is titled Bait.
Yep, season 1, episode 2 is titled Bait. It was directed by Michael Bassett. And written by Dominic Derquez. I probably butchered that last name. And the original air date was November 7th of 2015.
Yes, so just at the time we're recording this, a little over a month ago, and it actually had a pretty significant drop in viewership. About half the viewers came back for the second episode, which is a little disheartening, but at the same time, we do not know how much viewership the Starz network gets, but it had about 0.2 million viewers, so 276,000 viewers, drop off from 437,000 viewers in episode 1. But you expect that in a premiere. I wasn't expecting such a significant drop off in episode 2 because episode 1 kicked ass, and I thought it had a very high praise from critics and stuff. I don't know if the time slot changed or what happened, but there was definitely a drop off, and I think that's a little bit of note.
I think you got to take into factor too with some of this is a lot of people don't have Starz, so they may not be factoring into the amount of people that are downloading the episode, maybe from an illegal site or something along those lines.
Yeah, and I believe also these are available for purchase on the different outlets like Amazon and Hulu. I'm not really sure for sure about Hulu and stuff, but I think that these shows are available to.
You can buy it off of. You can actually rent it or buy it, whatever, off of the Xbox Live Marketplace too.
Okay, there you go.
So, there you go. I mean, it's kind of like one of those things. It's kind of like because Starz has their own kind of their own app as well. It's the Starz app, and it's kind of like HBO Go, so you can get it off there. There's like multiple places to get it from. I think where they're getting these numbers from is directly a person that has access to Starz and is tuned in at that point in time. So it may be a little bit different as far as certain things go, but yeah. But yeah, we can go ahead and start getting into the episode here.
Right before we actually do that, though, I did want to mention that you were saying about the Xbox Live Marketplace and stuff. One of the things that is very wrong with the current landscape of television and movies is that those numbers are very hard to track, and they're not publicly tracked. So you really have no idea, and a lot of times it actually leads to some turmoil between studios and directors and agents and stuff like that, because those numbers are still so hidden and they haven't really found an outlet to kind of make them public, and maybe they don't want to. I don't know. It's very complicated, and I've heard a lot of different people talk about it.
Yeah.
As well as, I will say that the director of this episode, Michael Bassett, I don't know him from much. It looks like he done a little bit of Star Trek stuff, and he did a Death Watch, which was from 2002, and Wilderness, which was from 2006, both horror movies, and he recently did the 2012 version of Silent Hill, and I believe he wrote the movie Bugs, which I believe is like It's either a television series or a movie. I'm not really sure.
That's interesting. He did the new Silent Hill movie. I haven't seen that movie yet, but it's kind of cool that he's actually done full-length movies and he's doing TV too. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah,
but,
I've heard that Death Watch movie from 2002 is actually pretty decent, and I have seen Wilderness, and I thought it was solid as well, maybe a little bit above average, not super great. It's that Death Watch one though I recently picked up, so I'm curious to check that one out. But the Dominic Derricks hasn't really done anything, so he's kind of a bit of a newbie here.
Yeah, I was going to say with these directors too for these TV shows, well, especially this show, it's really hard to even tell the difference between the directing style of these people because I feel like every episode kind of looks the same.
And that's intentional, right? They're trying to stay within a certain boundary. Some people, and that's with a lot of TV shows. I've heard a lot of directors over the years on podcasts being interviewed saying that like when they direct TV, they're not really allowed to go outside the box too much. They pretty much have to stick to what the show is known for. So there's not really a bunch of creativeness going on there. Now, if you get somebody like a Ty West or like a Rob Zombie who hasn't done like any TV, I'm sure that it'll show through. But
oh yeah,
definitely, it feels like Sam Raimi could have directed all of these, honestly.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree there. I mean, the first episode was really really good. I loved the directorial style of the first episode, and honestly, you could actually see with the last two. This is episode 2, but I've seen a couple more that a lot of the directing styles they're taking from Sam Raimi. A lot of the things from the original Evil Dead, a lot of the shots and things of that nature, they're trying to somewhat incorporate it into the show, and it's really interesting to see that because Sam Raimi back in the day was the director or one of the directors for the horror genre with all his weird camera angles, his camera shots, and it does show through in some of the stuff that is in the series so far that we have seen. They actually are showing a lot of, they're bringing up a lot of clips from the original, the first movie, which is really cool to see as well. I'm pretty stoked to see that as well in this episode with the intro. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah, pretty cool.
So let's go ahead and get into episode number 2 titled Bait.
Yeah, so pretty much this episode starts out and, Kelly, she's wanting to go to her parents' house. This Ash at the beginning of the episode, he did kill that old granny at the end of the last episode, at the end of the first episode. Kind of just picks up right there where it left off.
Yeah, and we know Kelly from the previous episode was worried about her father and her mother, who was supposedly dead, and she wants to go save her father. And Ash is, of course, very resistant to that. Kelly kind of just takes off on her own, steals the whip, and then leaves Pablo and Ash there by themselves. And I believe Ash believes that she has took the book. The Book of the Dead.
The Book of the Dead. So, and Ash was like, when she took off, he was kind of like telling Pablo, he's like, this is kind of it. This is the end of the road for us. I'm going to take off on my own. And then that's when Pablo kind of breaks the news. She took the book with her. We're going to have to go to her parents' house and kind of, help her out at this point because Ash didn't want to go. He wanted to do his own thing. And then that's where kind of the episode begins. They obviously get into Ash's whip and start driving toward Kelly's parents' house when all of a sudden, this is a great scene. This is my favorite scene in this entire episode. The Ash's boss and Pablo's boss pop out of the back seat as a deadite, and he starts trying to basically kill Ash and like choke him to death.
Yeah.
It was hilarious. Like
it really was.
I can't remember like some of the lines he said to Ash.
Dude,
but
this is a show where every time I watch it, I'm like, man, I should have wrote down some of those lines because they're so great. But then at the same time, I'd feel like I'd be butchering them because I wouldn't be able to say them like Bruce Campbell does.
Oh, dude, Bruce Campbell has the best lines in this show, and like it's so funny. Like Bruce Campbell's demeanor every time he says a line, he just doesn't give a fuck. He's like like not worried about anything. He knows he's the man. And I remember there's one line that I can't remember if it was in this episode or another episode, where he's like, just let the boomstick do the talking. I think
that's this episode. Yeah.
I just love that for some reason. But yeah, I mean, the Deadite, his boss and their boss pop out, try to kill Ash, start trying to run him off the road. Pablo, which we know from the previous episode, I said he looks like Kramer, sort of, from Seinfeld. He's like a Puerto Rican Kramer. He doesn't have any weapon. He's kind of scared. So funny, awesome scene. I actually love this scene because he takes the beer bottle. He has a beer bottle because Ash is like drinking and throwing beer bottles on the floor. He breaks it, kind of makes it sharp and like pointy, and gives it to Ash, or he actually like hits the Deadite with it. The Deadite kind of pushes him away and gives it to Ash, and Ash starts kind of just like shoving it up in this Deadite's throat, and like all this blood is just like pouring out.
And by filmmaking terms, it's a scene that where the comedy comes from is because it goes on too long. As a filmmaker, you know that when to cut, and when you don't cut when you're supposed to cut, that's when comedy ensues. So it's definitely like overdone, and that makes it funny.
Yeah, and this scene was actually, I just chuckled a little bit and like just thought it was funny because the amount of blood in this scene too is just really crazy. I mean, this is a mix of CGI blood, and there is a lot of practical blood in this. Like, I mean, Ash and Pablo are completely covered in blood, and it's just funny to see because there's this much blood coming out of this, this guy, this Deadite, and it's just all over them.
I did notice some of the CGI blood as well in that scene.
It's usually the squirting blood, like when it shows it squirting out, because it looks to me like how they do it is when they're shoving like the beer bottle up in this scene up in his neck. They got to have some kind of I don't know what Ash is holding or Bruce Campbell's holding, but they got to have some kind of squirting effect. And most of the squirting blood looks like it's CGI, and all the blood that's just pouring on their face, just kind of pouring out, is the actual real blood. So I don't know. It's really, really cool, interesting the way they do that. But yeah, they actually end up killing the Deadite. There was some really funny scene where they held it out the window and it got hit by a car. He said some funny line about it, like heads up or something.
Heads up. And there's even like a moment where Pablo kind of acknowledges like how badass that is for Ash to do.
Yeah, he's like, that's just he's like, you said heads up, man, and then his head got cut off. I was like, man, that's like, his lines this show is worth watching for Ash's lines.
Yeah, and honestly, Pablo, I'm beginning to like this episode too, because he just reminds me of almost like the Fan, but not in like Jamie Kennedy and Scream or whatever.
Yeah.
More just like the awe of Ash, like how we are, like how we're aware that Ash has all this swag. Like Pablo is kind of us. We get to like kind of look at it through his eyes a little bit.
I really like the characters in the show. I like Kelly, Pablo, and I obviously love Ash, but I feel like Kelly and Pablo, they just kind of they're kind of quirky characters. So it just, I don't know. It's really, really. It's a really, really cool mixture of people on this. So
yeah, and you know what? It's funny because like at first when they first announced like that Ash had these two sidekicks, I was like, oh really? Like they're gonna take all the attention away from Ash, but they really don't. If anything, they like Pablo highlights the attention, which is really cool. And of course, there's that interesting dynamic with the chick character. What's her name? Kelly.
Kelly, yeah.
Yeah, she's kind of like the anti, to Bruce Campbell's Ash. She's kind of the other version of that, where she's like just very serious and like doesn't buy into. She's like the opposite of Pablo. She doesn't really see Ash as awesome as Pablo does, which is a nice little contrast.
It is it's a really interesting dynamic to see all these characters kind of together like this. So
they show up at the house.
Yeah, they show up at the house. I was going to say they show up at the house, and it's kind of a funny scene where they get out, and Bruce or Ash is already ready to kind of confront Kelly's mom, because Kelly's mom's been dead apparently considered dead for apparently like close to a year now. They haven't seen her. They never found a body. They say that she drowned. She like ran off the road and drowned. But apparently she just all of a sudden shows up when all this stuff starts happening. And Ash already thinks, he's like, this is a Deadite. There's got to be a Deadite. So they show up at the house. They kind of kick in the door, him and Pablo. And he kind of pretty much starts talking shit. Like he starts kind of questioning the mom. Like,
well, first what happens is you expect them to go in, guns blazing, and have a huge Deadite fight. And when they go in there, everybody's the mom, the father, and Kelly are just sitting at the table, like about to eat dinner. And it's just this awkward moment where you're like,
yeah, you're kind of like, what?
And basically, the story is that Ash is kind of like, first they have to explain why they're all covered in blood, and he's like, yeah, I hit a deer, and and it's like, then the deer like exploded while I was trying to remove it, and the dad's like, I hunt all the time, and I've never heard of any exploding deers. It's fucking
Yeah,
so
it's
funny,
just
dude.
so funny. He's like, I've never heard of an exploding deer before. That's kind of odd. But yeah, it's really funny scene, and like they're covered in blood, like Ash and Pablo, and they're like kind of like, why are you covered in blood? You know, like we were just talking about the exploding deer. But you know, Ash starts kind of talking shit to the mom, like
Yeah,
questioning
he's
her.
grilling her. He's like
Yeah,
interrogating her because
like grilling her
Kelly
hard.
is saying like, "Oh no, my mom actually wasn't dead. She just when she wrecked her car, they never found her body. They presumed her dead. She's had amnesia, living in a homeless shelter, and now she's back." And Ash is like, "Ah, that's pretty convenient, actually." You know?
Oh yeah, yeah, and he's like it's pretty convenient that she shows up and she remembers all this stuff, and you know this, you know this all just happens at the same time. He said this is just doesn't feel right, and you can tell. I mean, pretty much it's kind of a dead giveaway because she's got like a fly flying around her head, and you keep seeing that fly, and obviously you know you can tell it's somebody that's dead. So I thought that was pretty interesting to see.
Absolutely.
And then the mom.
He basically is just grilling her, and everybody's kind of against him. And even Pablo, at a certain point, is like, "Yeah, well, you know, maybe it's actually her." Of course, after that, it is revealed that Pablo actually stole the Necronomicon in order to get Ash to come after Kelly,
Yep.
because we see him. We even see it later in the next episode that Pablo has a thing for Kelly.
Oh yeah. Pablo is all about some Kelly, and I will admit she's a very pretty chick.
You know what, man? I didn't think that she was like overly gorgeous at first, but she's growing on me, and I do find her pretty hot. I gotta admit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't find her like hugely attractive, but you know, I do think she's a very pretty girl. I mean, she's definitely, you know, if you're hanging around her for long enough, and you know, you could see kind of her in the way she is. She's very independent, and she likes to do her own thing, and that's kind of for at least me, and I'm sure a lot of guys, when you see like independent women, that's kind of a turn on for most guys. And she's kind of does her own thing and has her own way about doing things, and I think Pablo's kind of
she's
into
kind of
that.
a badass. Yeah.
But,
And so they're at the dinner, and the one line that was kind of funny was when the mother asks Ash if he has to be wearing a shotgun at the table.
oh yeah, and then the dad looks over and he's like, and because Ash is like, or he said something to the dad about hunting, and the dad just kind of looked at the mom, and
Yeah.
he was kind of sketched out by it. The funny part about this scene, the dinner table scene, he's still questioning the mom, but he's questioning her hardcore, and you know she brings the roast beef out, she brings
And
dinner
it's
out,
rare.
it's like rare, and it's like bloody all over the plate. The funny part I found about this scene was how like Ash is like sitting there completely pretty much talking shit, like really talking shit, and like being extremely rude to this mom, and this dad's such a pussy. He's just sitting there and he's not saying anything. I'm like, why is this dad such a pussy? And the dad, I mean, as you can see, you know, as he's talking shit, he ends up actually punching the mom in the face at some point for no reason. Just like, you know, she's answering questions, and he's like, well, what are you going to do now that you're back? And then she's like, I guess I'm going to, you know, stay hanging out with family. And then he just punches her in the face, not just knocks her out.
Yeah, so Ash, you know, and for a brief moment, obviously the audience should know better and be like, oh yeah, she's definitely a deadite or whatever from the very beginning. But at the moment when he punches her and nothing happens, you're like, uh-oh. What if you did make
and you're
a
like,
mistake?
because he made some comment, he's like, and when she got back up and turned into a deadite, he goes, well, I'm glad she got back up and turned into a deadite because I was about to feel like a real asshole or something like that.
Or a real dick. He's like, I was about to feel like a real dick.
Exactly. And the dad,
which totally like comments on what we're thinking as an audience and what we're feeling. It's honestly like, I'm so happy with the level of comedy and how it works, because I really wasn't expecting it to work as well as it does.
Well, see, the thing I'm happy about with this is the comedy and the gore factor. There's a lot of gore in this show. I mean, there's a lot of blood, gore, and like if it was comedy and just some like deadite horror, I would probably be less inclined to like it. But the actual effects and even the CGI, like I kind of said on the last episode, the CGI was kind of a downer for me. It's starting to grow on me a little bit because I don't really mind it that much. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of practical and a lot of CGI in it, but it's not as bad as I was kind of talking on the last episode. I mean, it's a little bit better in this episode, but yeah, I mean, the dad, after he punches her, he kind of runs over to me. You can tell the dad's not a deadite, and the mom turns into a deadite. And at this point, Kelly kind of retreats to her bedroom or a bedroom, and the deadite mom is kind of like walking around on the walls.
Yeah, I believe she starts singing "Hush, Little Baby," which I think is a callback to to the
Yeah.
old Evil Dead movies.
It is. It's from the original Evil Dead movie, actually. Yeah, so, Kelly's in there. The mom's kind of like faking being a real mom and saying that, like, Kelly, help me, Kelly, help me, Kelly, help me. And then, Ash kind of comes in. And
he basically tells her at one point in this episode that they do this. This is what they do. They pretend to be what you want them to be, and then when you least expect it, they kind of go for the throat.
Exactly. And like Ash, he actually, turns on his chainsaw, tells Kelly and Pablo to get down. He starts fighting with this Deadite, the mom Deadite, and he actually gets his chainsaw caught in a wall, but ends up getting it out and actually cuts off the Deadite's head, the mom's head, which is really cool scene. He kind of holds up the head and he just kind of throws it off to the side once she's dead. And then it kind of cuts to a scene after that. As you see, the cool thing about this scene, as far as like the head cutting scene off, is when he's cutting the head off, there's like blood spewing all over Pablo and Kelly, and they're just kind of sitting there, like they're not moving. They're just like letting this blood get all over them. I was kind of like, I think I'd move over a little bit if I was them, with all this blood getting all over them, but. Kind of cuts off, and it shows them at the kind of toward the end of the episode here. Kind of shows them burying the mom and the dad in the backyard.
Yeah, and if you're wondering what happened to the dad, he got a fork to the eye by the mother.
Yeah, he did get a fork to the eye by the mother. I forgot to mention that. Yeah, so the mom like stabs a fork onto the table and like shoves his head through the fork, which is pretty cool as well. It's neat to watch, but yeah, the dad and the mom die. They bury him in the backyard with crosses. And funny scene is Kelly looks over at Ash and he's like, my parents were Jewish. And there's like crosses in the ground. And he's like, it would have been nice if you told me that before I made these crosses.
Classic Ash moment, right?
Yeah.
And then he actually says a funny line too here, and he's like, you're kind of like me. Deadites ruin your life, and you're hot as hell.
Yeah. That's
You're like a young me.
The funny lines don't stop with this show.
Yeah, that's like offensive on a couple levels, because one, he's like, saying you're hot, and then also he's like saying that like I'm like that he is also hot, which is ridiculous.
Exactly, which is kind of like very self-conceited. It's pretty funny. But then it kind of like the end of this is the very end of the episode. It shows the officer. Do you remember what the officer's name was?
From the first episode?
Yeah.
The black chick?
Yep.
I believe it's Amanda.
Yeah, Amanda Fisher. It shows her. She found in this episode. She actually went to Ash's trailer park and found a card that said "Books from Beyond," and it shows her at the end of the episode pulled up at Books from Beyond, the store, the bookstore, where Ash had came a long time ago and needed the Necronomicon or the Book of the Dead kind of. I guess what would the word be for
Deciphered?
it? Deciphered. There we go. Deciphered. And then the episode cuts off. So.
Yeah, I really this episode was a lot of fun to me. It was definitely I don't think it was as good as the first episode, but it's still right there, man. It really is. Like, there's a lot of funny moments. I thought that the humor of the parents sitting around the table and Ash just being a complete dick worked so well.
Oh yeah, it definitely did. Like, I love how Bruce Campbell pulls off this character. Like, absolutely love how much of an asshole he is, and it still continues to be funny. Like, he is he is the king of like being somebody that says something and pisses some. I don't know. It's just really awesome to see how he pulls off this character and like his witty comments and the kind of smart ass comments.
Yeah, there's a lot of levels to him. Like, he has this kind of swagginess to him, but at the same time, he's kind of boneheaded and puts his foot in his mouth a lot and just says the wrong thing a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he kind of like says the wrong thing, but yet at the same time, the people around him don't really seem like they care too much. They're just kind of like confused by him,
yeah.
Like his character.
He's very offensive to people.
Exactly. Yeah, very, very offensive.
Very unapologetic.
He has no filter basically whatsoever.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that pretty much wraps up episode 2.
Absolutely.
I guess we can get into our thoughts on the episode, JP.
Yeah, like I said, man, I think it works. It's something that I'll probably comment on again as we go further through this. Pretty much, like, my only complaint on this episode is that it is so short. This show has a like 27-ish minute running time, and it goes by really fast. That's a good thing and both a bad thing, because at the same time you can kind of tell that these episodes are very formulaic in terms of like there's there's the issue, and then there's the climax, and then there's the solving of the issue. And it seems like, I feel like this show is going to kind of go through those motions a little bit, and it does move forward a little bit in plot, but a little bit at a time. And I think it's because of the fact that it's such a short, condensed time, just 27 or so minutes, which is, I think it's a good thing if you're looking for just these quick hits. But in terms of something that's really going to make you get super engaged and, have you like running back week to week, like cliffhangers and stuff like that, this probably isn't the show. At least now it's not in these first 2 episodes. This seems like more of just a show that you can't wait to flip on Saturday night and get your quick fix of Ash versus the Evil Dead, and then it's on to the next thing you do during that night.
Yeah, and the thing that I kind of agree with you. The thing I feel about it as well is I feel like that some of these episodes, like these next 2 episodes we do the podcast on, I feel like they could have just combined them and made maybe 5 or 6 episodes in this season, because a lot of shows only have 5 or 6 episodes in their first season. Like I know, like Game of Thrones, I think was one. Walking Dead didn't have very many in their first season, and Breaking Bad, yeah. I mean, that kind of works for an episode, like a first season kind of deal. And I mean, these, like you said, they're 27 minutes long. They can combine them, and it could be like an X-Files episode where it's 45 minutes, and it would be a little bit, wouldn't leave you so much on, you're not getting too much content out of the episode. I mean, I feel like these episodes with the Ash vs. Evil Dead, it's like, there's an underlying thing they're doing in the episode, and then a big kind of action scene, and then it's the end of the episode, and kind of leaves you with not really a cliffhanger, just kind of what they're doing next, like on the next week's episode.
Yeah, so. It seems very formulaic, and that's something, Kyle, that is kind of new though. The 6-episode pilot seasons were not the norm. It's kind of something that's happened in modern times. Back in the 80s and 90s, they never did that. If a show got picked up, they would make pilots, and then if the show got picked up, it would be 24 episodes, 20 episodes, 18 episodes. It's now the type of things, because studios are putting so much money into their pilot seasons that they don't want to take the risk of doubling their money and it only working, for it getting canceled or whatever, you know what I mean? So that's something that's happening now. And I thought initially that this show did get announced as a 6-episode pilot season, but I guess that they changed their mind, or that maybe I'm misremembering information, but I thought that it was only a 6-episode pilot season.
Yeah, I don't really know as far as that goes. I mean, there obviously is 10 episodes now. They could have just upped it, because I know that there's a lot of like reception, pretty big reception for this show after it first premiered. They even came out and said that they were going to already renew it for a second season. So they could have changed some stuff around after it actually got premiered for the first time. So who knows? So
I think our final thoughts is tiers. We do this thing, if you guys don't know, where we tier these episodes: high tier, mid tier, and low tier. What do you think, man?
See, the tiers is kind of one of those things too right now with this show. It's hard to tell, because
you don't have a lot of reference.
You don't have a lot of reference to go off of. You don't really know where the show, like the direction it's going in. I mean,
you don't have a peak example and a low example. That's kind of what I'm like in the X-Files show right now.
Yeah, and then when I'm saying when we're saying tiers, I'm kind of a high tier is an episode where you get you're going to get a lot of dialogue and a lot of info on. Mid-tier is kind of like just a generic episode, and low-tier is just a really shitty episode. I would probably give this a mid-tier. I mean, it definitely doesn't give you, like, a whole lot of info. You're pretty much just going and saving Kelly's parents in this episode, pretty much the entire episode.
How I'm going to look at it is, if I expected that this was the peak of what this show can offer, I would be disappointed, because I feel like this show could be a lot better than this episode. That's not saying that this episode is bad. I'm just saying that I would hope that in an entire run of a series, there would be an episode better than this. So I'm going to go right with you, man. I'm going to say mid-tier. Definitely a really good episode. Mid-tier does not mean bad. It's like your middle episode. It's just your middle excitement episode. And that's what this is. I think that's going to wrap it up, dude. You agree?
Yeah, I definitely agree, man, and appreciate you guys listening to the Ash vs. Evil Dead podcast, and stay tuned till episode 3.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we get out of here, I just want to say I am JP. That is Kyle. You can check me out on YouTube, DoubleShotJ. Kyle on YouTube, The Horrorphile. You can also check us out on Horrorphilia.com, 22 shots of moods and horror.com. I have a podcast. Kyle has a podcast. I have another podcast, which is the X-Files podcast and the 22 Shots of Moods and Horror podcast. Check those out. You will love them. And we will see you guys next time with another breakdown of Ash versus the Evil Dead. Next time, episode 3.